Greetings. We're going to talk about secure electronic commerce, digital payment systems. The history of credit started back in the 1750s before Christ, the BC time period. And now, as you know, we're in the AD period. Not until 1730 was credit even really offered, or an extended period of time to purchase something. Christopher Thornton created that back in about 1730. After the Civil War, though, the United States started seeing how these furniture type things and businesses are starting to give some of credit. So it really took a hold after the Civil War. In the early 1900s, more stores began to giving consumers a line of credit, if you will, especially to the wealthier people. And so that's why you had the Diners Club and American Express, and they were really big into that back in the early 1900s. Then comes the 1920s, then you have your oil companies and like Exxon and Phillips 66 and all those. They started giving you a courtesy card, the paper form of a credit card, and they would reissue it to you every 3 to 6 months. The Farrington Manufacturing Company of Boston included a charge plate. It basically just lets you, with one single piece of plate, you could use it at multiple stores. So that kind of gave you the idea of, oh, I can use this one card at multiple stores. Then the Diners Club came out in 1949, and McNamara and Snyder were the two in Bloomingdale, who, of course, came up to Bloomingdale's, to start talking about this over lunch. And then they decided, well, let's try this all within the New York area and see what happens. Well, they gave these cards to 200 people, and they accepted them at 27 different restaurants. They charged 7% per transaction, as well as a monthly fee. So you can imagine how quickly this credit would wind up against you. Now, that's when you start talking more about the wealthy people, that's where it comes into play. Now, payment cards in the U.S., you literally have thousands of different types. Mainly, you have 4 or 5 big ones. You have American Express, Discover, Diners Club, MasterCard, and Visa. Well, American Express and Diners Club are more of your membership. They're issued by one institution. They're not spread out like the marketing of MasterCard and Visa, where those are your memberships, like your bank's debit card. The bank will pay Visa or MasterCard for their branded logo so where it can be accepted everywhere. That's where it comes about. And the member banks can set their interest rate and terms. But what does Visa or MasterCard do? Well, they allow you to charge at multiple places, and it all comes back to that one location. So, how many credit cards do you think are really out there anymore? Well, there are approximately 5 cards for every man, woman, and child. And a little bit of humor today, when you look at these. The bankruptcy specialist, all credit cards are welcome, And it's not trying to say that you're gearing towards that, but where are we going with this? Well, back in the dot-com boom, we started looking at how purchases are going to be done. Well, you can't quite give cash over the internet, so they decided we're going to use credit card transactions. Their authorizations used to be time consuming. They could take 2-3 minutes. Now the average time is 5 seconds. And what they do is they authorize the purchase, meaning that you have funds available. They don't actually charge it until the transaction is done. If you're using a credit card, you have a $50 maximum liability. Not so if you use a debit card, because that's direct authorization into your bank account, and there is no liability on that. Bank fees are usually encumbered by the merchant, so if the business will say, okay, I'm going to take the 2.5% interest per swipe fee, or a 3.5% key-in fee, and I'm not going to charge my consumers. Well, that's not necessarily true, because the merchants are going to pass that cost on to you in some way, whether it's higher prices of an item or whatever. But that's how that works. Now, in the internet, you have the two different types of transactions. You have secured and unsecured, or if you want to think about it, more of encrypted versus unencrypted. Do I want to use my credit card with a transaction over the internet in an unencrypted style? Absolutely not. You want to be in the SSL type where you have HTTPS, you have the little lock symbol down on the bottom of your browser, so that you know that once your information is traversed the browser, it is an encrypted format and not able to be read. For every credit card transaction, there are 5 different parties. You'll have a consumer, which is you yourself. You'll have the merchant, is who you're buying from. You will have your bank, the consumer's bank, who gave you that card to begin with. You have the merchant's bank, also known as the acquiring bank, because that's where the funds will be taken from. And then you have what we call the interbank network. That's Visa, if you will. So here's a little drawing of how it goes. The consumer will give the card, the purchase is rung up. Consumer will give the card to the merchant. The merchant then gets the authorization from that acquiring bank, which is their bank, saying, okay, here's what the funds that I'm going to need. The acquiring bank sends it to the consumer's bank saying, is this going to be approved or declined? If it's approved, then the response comes, either way, the response comes back to the acquiring bank or the merchant's bank. They will take that response and then they notify the merchant. The merchant then says, okay, whether I'm going to fill it or at this time we can't do it because your card's been declined. The merchant would fill the order if it was approved. Then they present those charges back to the acquiring bank, who then sends it to the consumer's bank, who will then send the funds back to the acquiring bank. The acquiring bank then gives the funds to the merchant. And so that's how the process goes. But how do we know that the credit cards are actually correct? Well, we have what we call a check digit algorithm. Okay? It just proves whether the card's valid or invalid. Now, you have an assignment on this in the class to where I gave you 5 credit cards and you have to prove to me whether they are valid or invalid. The first step, multiply each digit in the credit card by its weight. Now, here's the catch. If the credit card is 16 digits long, and usually credit cards are, with the exception of American Express, that means you're going to start with a 2. Then you'll go alternate 1, 2, 1, 2 after that, okay? If it's an odd amount, then it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Now, after you've gotten the second row and you put it directly underneath the credit card number, and I'll show you an example here in just a minute, if you will multiply that credit card digit, for example, the first digit is a 3 on the credit card, it's 16 characters long, then you're multiplying by 2, that gives you a 6. Okay, that would be your answer. However, if it was a 6 on that credit card, and it still had the 16 digits, so I'm multiplying by the factor of 2, then I'm now at 12. Well, how do you figure that? Well, if the amount comes up to be higher than 9, you have to subtract 9 from it. And that will give you, so if I had 12, I take my 9 away, now I have a 3 for that value, for that particular individual. Then I add up all the individual numbers together to come up with a collective number. I will then take those weights and I will mod it by 10. Well, for those of you who haven't had statistics, mod or modulus, if you will, all it means is what is the remainder when I divide it by 10. So example, if I have 78, I mod it by 10, that means I'm dividing by 10 and I want to know the remainder. So 10 can go into 78 7 times with a remainder of 8, so the answer would be 8. If the result, and then, so you're looking for that 8, or if you're looking for 0. If it's anything other than 0 when you mod it, it's invalid. And the last digit of the number is called the check digit. So what would be and there's an example of what would be the missing digit. When you add them up together, it will tell you what it would be. Okay, so here's the example. Our credit card is 3356113147299138. We have 16 digits. We're going to multiply start with the 2 is the multiplier. Then we alternate the 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2 all the way through. And so if you look at the first number, you have 3 times 2, that gives you 6. The next number, 3 times 1, gives you a 3. 5 times 2 gives you 10. Well, now 10 was greater than 9, right? So we take the 9 away. That gives you the 1. Then we have 6 times 1 is 6. So as you can see where we're going, when you add the 6, 3, 1, and 6 together, you get 16. And then I've already figured out the rest of them for you. So you come up to be 78 is your total weight of this entire credit card. Well, if I take it and I do the modulus of 10, that gives me 8. So the card is thus invalid. Use these example is on your homework assignment, so you can kind of see how it goes. When we were talking about the transaction surcharge that is paid by the merchant, the difference of that, whatever, basically they take it, divide it by 2, and it's split between the merchant and the interbank network. So that's how Visa makes their money off of all this. Now, some merchant banks will charge the merchants an additional per transaction fee called an authorization fee. And it's usually pennies, real small amount. Could be 10 cents, 25 cents per transaction. You've probably heard that. Oh, it's 2.35% plus 10 cents per swipe. That's where it's coming from. Issuing banks may make money on annual fees that they can charge to a consumer for the use of their card. Why would merchants be willing to suffer those fees? Because if I'm swiping a card, I want to know that I'm going to get my money right on at that time. No questions asked. Now, there was an article several years ago from NPR, National Public Radio, that says a restaurant in Washington, D.C. will not accept credit cards anymore. They only accept cash. It's their choice. So you want to kind of look at it. This restaurant didn't want to spend the money for those. So they've really narrowed their scope of their business. Credit refunds and chargebacks. Okay, a charge card can give you 2 different ways. It's a two-way street. Refunds are issued by the merchants. Let's say I take something back to Walmart. They can put the money back on my card. It usually takes 2 to 3 business days. That's what we call a refund. But we as individuals can do what we call a chargeback. We can say, I'm charging this back because it was a fraud. I'm disputing it. I didn't make this transaction. Okay, that's what we call a chargeback. So you need to make sure you understand what the difference between a refund and a chargeback is. Debit cards. They look just like regular credit cards, except they're tied directly to your bank account and they deduct directly from your bank account. I'm sure all of you know that. And they fall under different regulations as far as liability because of the insurances like FDIC and NCUA and things like that. So be sure you read your documents carefully before you sign for a debit card or a credit card, because there are huge differences. Internet, now we have many different ways you can pay. You have credit cards, you have your debit cards. We had a system called Virtual PIN, which we'll talk about, and eCash, which we'll talk about. And pretty much all of you are familiar with PayPal. And now we have the new one, Take Home Today, Pay Later. But those are really some of the payment systems that we have into place. Now, with each one of these payment systems, we have 3 different types of privacy mode. We have anonymous, we have private, and we have identifying. What is anonymous? That means they cannot figure out who you are, pretty much. I mean, granted, in the internet society, you can figure out anyone who's anyone. Private. The payment system may tell the identity to the merchant. So if we have a private enterprise, they can say, yes, this is Prof. Stokely's credit card, and then they can know that, yes, it wasn't a false credit card that we've just redone the magnetic strip on. Okay, and then third, we have identifying, where the merchants will know your identity and makes it a lot harder to commit fraud. Virtual PIN. Well, it's now defunct, but it was developed in 1994. Basically, it was an internet charge system. You didn't have to have, all you had to have was an email, and there was no encryption, security tied to the email, and it kept your credit card off of the internet. That's really what it was. What would happen is you would enroll and fill out this web email form and give it a PIN. You'd say, for example, 1111 is my PIN number. So the first virtual sends the subscriber email with your application ID and a toll-free number. You call it up, and you can call in your credit cards. You just tell them what all your credit cards are. Each credit card could have a different PIN number. So then first virtual would send confirmation and a final PIN augmented that's different from your PIN. The consumer would go to the store, give that merchant the PIN number. The merchant would send the PIN number to the first virtual for authorization, and first virtual confirms with the consumer that yes, they send them an email. Is this your transaction? If you say no or fraud, the purchase won't go through. If it said yes and the charge was there were funds available, then it would go through. Well, why didn't it stay around? Well, security and privacy for one. There was no encryption, and there's not really good email security per se. I mean, it's easy to spoof, intercept it by reading on Wi-Fi networks or whatever. Credit card protection gives you limited liability. It gives you a credit buffer. It gives you a chance to reverse the charges and anonymity. Merchants were shielded from seeing who this customer really was. So, was it really a good thing? Not necessarily. Then along came what we call DigiCash. It came from Dr. David Chaum. It's also known as eCash. Basically, it was digital coins. These tokens were signed by the U.S. Mint, and you could actually exchange them or cash them in. Now, they've gone bankrupt and they're no longer in service, but here's what would happen. You would download this DigiCash software. You would establish an account with the U.S. Mint that was tied to your regular bank account. You would deposit your money or transfer money over to this DigiCash account, and you would have this electronic wallet, similar to Google Wallet kind of thing. You'd obtain digital coins, and they would send you a block of coins. Now, they're what we call XOR'd, or XOR'd. They're blinded. That means the Mint doesn't know who they were, where they came from, or where they're going to. The coins that are sent to the Mint will be signed. They will equal the amount of the withdrawn from what your real account was. So if you say, I'm withdrawing $20, they'll give you $20 in coins. The coins are returned to the user unblinded, so I can see how much I've got. But all the blinding does is prevent the U.S. Mint from transferring it back. And part of this was it would help against laundering, or so they thought. Purchasing with this DigiCash, the wallet communicated with the merchants for the coin exchange. Y'all are familiar with Bitcoin. Same idea. Coins can be sent by email, special applications, or postal mail. The security of it was anonymous. You can make it total or conditional depending on the way you wanted to. And it prevented double spending. Because the bank would see that you're using the same number twice for that coin, and it would prevent you from doing it. It also encourages people to race to the bank. Another way we could do it is called cybercash. Basically, what it is an encrypted web interface for normal credit card transactions. Your merchant will never see your credit card number. Again, cybercash is similar to Bitcoin. It's just an adaptation of a small value transactions. They've been were forced into bankruptcy, and they were purchased by VeriSign. Same idea. You would download this wallet software. You would create your public and private key pair. You could enroll all your credit cards, and basically it would solve itself as a helper, another toolbar that you don't really need. In purchases were initiated by a mine. The wallet displays the transaction. The consumer asks which credit card to use. Then they send the encrypted order to the merchant. The merchant adds the info, digitally signed, sends it to the CyberCash gateway. CyberCash gateway gets all this information, validates everything, and then approves or denies depending on what the result was. Security and privacy. The payment information is encrypted before it is sent, and the merchant never had access to your account. So what about PayPal? Well, PayPal, it's a payment service owned by eBay. Everyone knows that, right? And you can tie it directly to your account. You can have a balance on there, and it allows the consumers, that middleman between your merchant and there, so no one has direct access to your account. The credit card processor enables that merchant to receive the credit cards and other payments. The bookkeeping and reporting system will give you a track of everything that you've gone on. And there's a financial hub that links different financial information such as credit cards, bank accounts, multiple currency balances, business or individual info, and multi-user access authorized employees. What that means is I can make it anyone have access to this PayPal account to do the charges that I need them to do. What is PayPal? Well, it's a payment service. It allows consumers to pay online with a credit card, a bank account, or a PayPal balance, any way of which you wanted to do. At first, you would shop on eBay, and then you could check out with PayPal. Now PayPal allows you to do it to multiple different sites, and you don't have to be tied to eBay. So what does it do? It goes to the credit card processor that enables the business and individuals to receive that credit card and other payments. Then you have the bookkeeping and reporting system for online purchases. It gives you the history of everything that you've done and you've sold or bought. And it's a financial hub that links all your financial information. You can put all sorts of information there if you want. What does PayPal do for you, though? Well, it allows you to send money, allows you to see an overview of your account. You can do website payments, managing payments, shipping and tracking. You can do auction tools, PayPal shops. So, I mean, there's a lot of different resources that you can do with PayPal. And here's just a couple little slides that kind of show what you can send money. It's similar to MoneyGram or Western Union. So long as they have a PayPal account, you can send it directly to them. And guess what? It's cheaper. And then they verify the information on the other side. You can read it, and we're good to go. Again, there's a lot of different things that you can do with it. So is there any questions? If so, feel free to email me.